here and dive right in. Before we do, though, does anybody have any questions from last week or about anything that's gone on since then? Any questions at all? All right, and then one final question. Did you guys receive your handouts for this week emailed to you from Taylor? Did everybody get those handouts? There should have been about 6 of them. One of them's a basic math handout. One of them is a vocab list. One of them's a text completions. Okay, so you guys have not received those handouts. Okay. Let me go ahead. We'll get started here in right now. But at some point, I'm going to go ahead and email you guys those handouts. And one in particular, the text completions handout, is designed to go along with this this lesson today. So just keep in mind that all of what we're going to talk about today, I'll be sending you guys a handout that that reviews it, about a 3 or 4 page handout that reviews all of that. So if there's anything you miss, stop me, ask away, but also don't freak out too much because there is a really good handout that you guys will be receiving. All right, so let's take a look at our basic strategy for text completions. And once again, this is something that we looked at last week, but I just want to reinforce this once again. So the basic process is to start by reading only the sentence. And what that really means, read only the sentence, really means ignore the answers, right? Ignore the answers to start. And you guys are going to hear me say this about 150 million times before the course ends. But the only way you're going to miss a problem if you know the meaning of the words is if you get tricked by the answer choices. That's what they're going to try to do with the answer choices. They're going to try to trick you by not looking at the answer choices too early, by focusing instead on the sentence itself. We can try to avoid some of those traps that the answer choices will present to us. So let's read the sentence. We've got, if the former senator had only refrained from blank older voters in her speeches, she would likely not have lost what turned out to be a close election. Okay, so when we're reading the sentence, we want to get a good sort of holistic idea of what the sentence means in the first place. But we also want to look for the specific language in the sentence that helps tell us what goes in the blanks. And so we're going to call that the target, the clue, and the pivot. And the target is maybe the simplest idea. The target is just what the blank is referring to. So the target is what the blank refers to. The clue is kind of the exact opposite. It's the word or words or phrase in the sentence that refers back to the blank. And finally, we want to look for pivots. And not every sentence is going to have a pivot, but when they're there, they're very helpful. And the pivots are just a way of us recognizing whether the clue agrees or disagrees with the blank. So let's start with the target here. What do you guys think this blank is referring to? What do you guys think the blank is talking about? Okay, something negative, I'd agree with that. But I guess what I'm thinking here is more think about the target as being what the blank itself describes. So I totally agree with you guys that the word in the blank is going to end up being negative. But let's, okay, so Jane's got it. Yeah, the senator's speech having some sort of an effect on the older voters. So I would say the target for this sentence is something about the senator, right? The blank is describing the senator. And Jignasa is giving us malign. We'll get to that in a second, Jignasa. We're just still trying to figure out the different language in here that's important. Okay, how about the clue? What in here tells us what the blank should look like? Everybody's saying, okay, she lost the election. Yeah, I agree with you guys 100%. So lost the election, the close election. So that tells us that this senator must have done something negative. And then finally, a pivot, right? She would likely not have lost, right? She would likely not have lost. And if she'd refrained from. So this is actually important, right? Think about how this sentence changes if I take away the word refrained. If the former senator had only blanked older voters, then the word would have been positive. Do you guys see where I'm going with that? So there's a big difference between not doing something and losing the election and doing something and losing the election. And then we add in this idea that what we're talking about is not losing the election, right? She would not have lost the election if only she'd refrained from doing something. So this is how complicated this is, right? That we've got this idea that we could have rewritten the sentence sort of in the sense of because the senator blanked older voters, she lost the election. But now we've put it in this sort of if-then phrase, and we've also put in this refrain from and likely not. And so we're shifting constantly the relationship between the pivot and the clue. This problem itself, not that bad, and you guys all recognize right off the bat that it's going to be something negative. But as these problems get harder and harder, we need to get more and more capable of teasing out these little phrases, teasing out these relationships amongst the words. All right, and now this is probably the most important step of all of them. We want to take the time to write our own fill-in. And so Jignasha gave us a great one. I like it. So maligned. Okay, anybody have another word they might put in here? Anybody have another word that they like other than maligned? Maligned is good, but anybody else? Okay, yeah, insulted. Yeah. And maybe just did something negative to them, right? Belittled, that's a good one too. Insulted, belittled, same idea. Good. So point here is that we want to write our own fill-in because we are not going to plug the answers into the blanks. We're going to compare each of our answer choices back to the words that we came up with. And the reason why we're doing this is this prevents us from getting caught in a number of different traps. If all we do is plug the answers into the blank or blanks, then what we're really doing is we're just listening. We're using our ears to see what sounds the best. But we don't really care about that. It's not about what sounds the best in a literary standpoint. What matters is, what is the sentence trying to say? Which word completes the sentence in the most appropriate way? All right, and now we're going to look at each of the answer choices, and we'll put a check if we think it's a good match, an X if we think it's a bad match, this sort of tilde if it's a sort of match, and then most important, I think, is being open to putting down a question mark when we don't know the meaning of the word. And if we don't know the meaning of the word, then we have to keep it. Okay, so do we think aiding matches maligned, insulted, did something negative? What do you guys think? Only, okay, a couple of people have opinions. All right, no. All right, so on my paper, I'm going to mark down for the first one an X, right? And this is something that I'll do, honestly, on the day of the test on my own scratch paper. Okay, how about enervating? Did the senator enervating, what does enervate mean? Anybody have any ideas? You guys are all saying no. That must mean you know what enervating means because we put, okay, sapping energy. Couldn't that be something negative? Okay, but are we sure that insulting is correct? What if we came up with the what if we came up with something a little bit too specific? Are we so sure that insulting is correct that we're unwilling to look at any negative word other than insult? Okay, let's hold on to it, but we don't love it. Okay, how about offending? How about offending? Okay, so we like that one a lot. And by the way, I'm not trying to say that enervating is actually the correct answer. Definitely not trying to say that, but what I am trying to say is don't eliminate too quickly. We came up with maligned or insulted, and those are great words. Both of those could be correct. When we're looking at the answers, we want to keep anything that's even sort of close to those, anything in the ballpark, and that way we won't eliminate anything too quickly. And then we can always go back and compare the remaining answers. All right, how about defacing? Does that make sense? Defacing as insulted, maligned, did something negative? Okay, I've got one opinion of yes. Anybody else? Catherine's saying no. Seems a little too extreme. Okay, defacing the elderly. What does that mean, to deface the elderly? Yeah, I mean, probably the senator would lose the election if she defaced the elderly, but she might get arrested for it as well, right? I don't know. Personally, I might keep this. It seems negative. I might keep this. I don't like it. But I want to look at each of these individually. I don't want to decide that I like offending so much that I automatically eliminate everything else, because then, if it turns out that I'm wrong, that means I'm not giving enough of a chance to the other answers. So no reason why we can't keep a couple the first time through. Okay, how about disabusing? How about disabusing? Okay, Catherine's saying maybe. Anybody else? Any other thoughts about disabusing? Ignacia is saying no. Why not? What does disabusing mean? And it's totally fine if disabusing is a question mark. Let me know, and we'll put question mark down as well. All right, Caitlin's giving me a question mark. Yeah, okay. I'm going to put question mark down for now because we didn't all know the word, which is totally fine. But let's talk a little bit. We'll come back to the meaning of the word in just a second, and let's take a look at where we're at. So at this stage, we got rid of one for sure. We had two that we kept just to be careful. I would now go back and look at them and say enervating. That doesn't really work idiomatically. The senator's not stealing energy or weakening older people, right? So I'm going to switch that to an X. And I liked what people were saying before. Defacing, way too strong. That's out now. That's out. So now I'm trying to decide between C and E. I'm trying to decide between a word that I like and a word that I don't know the meaning of. And once again, a couple of you guys know what disabusing means, and we'll come back to that in a second. But let's pretend just for a second we don't actually know what it means. Here we've got a hard decision. We've got to decide between a word we don't know and a word that we do know that we like. If I think offending works really well, I'm choosing it every time. But if I only kept offending to be careful and I don't think it works very well, then I might actually have to take a guess on the word that I don't know the meaning of. And that is very uncomfortable. That's very uncomfortable, but we've got to do it. If you know that 4 words are wrong, you got to pick the 5th word, even if you have no clue what it means. That just makes sense, right? And when I say it in the abstract, I'm sure that you guys are all like, yeah, tell us something we don't know. But actually, in point of fact, when you're doing the problems on the day of the test, it's sometimes hard to make yourself pick an answer that you don't know the meaning of. It's just uncomfortable. But if you know 4 are wrong, you gotta pick the other one, even if you don't know what it means. Okay, so Chignasha actually gave me the perfect definition for that a while back. Oh, I'm sorry, Emma gave me the perfect definition for it. Convince someone of being mistaken. That's exactly what disabusing means. You might have heard the phrase, disabuse you of that notion. So someone believes something and the other person says, let me disabuse you of that notion. That simply means that to convince you that you're wrong, and that's what disabuse means. And so that one's out. And the correct answer is offending, which I think we all would have gotten because it works pretty well with the words that we came up with originally. All right. Questions about the basic process at all? Okay, so every problem has to have a clue. Every problem has to have a clue. Not every problem has a pivot, although a lot of them do. And not every problem has a target. So think about it like this. The target is what the blank refers back to. The clue is what refers to the blank. And not every problem is going to have a really good solid target, but sometimes it's helpful to think about what the blank refers to help you better understand the context or the style of the sentence, or to better predict the style of word that's going to go in the blank. So let's practice this a little bit more. Let's see another one. So here we've got a problem. The employees lamented that their manager was so blank that any meeting he led was bound to take twice as long as necessary. Interesting. Okay. Do you guys see any clues? All right, so these employees lamented, right? These employees lamented. So this is something they're not happy about, right? And the meetings take twice as long as necessary. Yeah, absolutely. And so what is a clue? Well, it's the most descriptive part of the sentence. It's what tells us what goes in the blank. And every one of these sentences has to have a clue. If it doesn't have a clue, they cannot expect you to be able to answer the question. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit of a judgment call, but identifying the clues consistently and doing it well is really, really important. It's what's going to get you, going to get you a long way on these. Okay, so yeah, hop on there. Catherine, did you have a question? And feel free to hop on the mic if you'd like. That's a great question. That's a really great question. And I'm going to be a weasel here, and I'm not going to answer that question directly. Most people are probably not going to have enough time to write down the clues on their scratch paper, to be honest with you. So this is almost something that has to happen at a more mental level. I would probably do it on some problems. In fact, I do it on some problems, but on a lot of problems I don't. Other people might find that they need to write the clues down a little bit more. So when you're practicing, definitely look for them and maybe write them down, and maybe when you're reviewing, go back and find them again. But on the actual day of the test, this process needs to happen, this idea of reading the sentence and finding the clues, finding the pivots. You really got to be able to do that in about 45 seconds or so, so that you still have enough time to go back and answer the questions themselves, because we're dealing with look at the answers themselves, because we're really dealing with about an average of 1.5 minutes per problem. Some you'll spend a little bit more on because they have multiple blanks, some a little bit less because they only have one blank, but it's not a tremendous amount of time. So I would say that write down clues when it's helpful, when you need to, but if you see the clue right away and you see what the blank should be, then you probably don't need to do it. You probably don't need to do it. Does that make sense? All right, so let's talk about the pivot. Are there any pivots in this problem? Any pivots here that help us know which direction we're going with this one? And if so, what do you think? And this is really what a pivot is, and I just sort of gave it away there. But, you know, it determines the relationship between the clues and the blank. Determines the relationship. And then we might have something that agrees with it. And yeah, the so, what does the word so here mean? The word so, in this case, means something of extremeness, right? He is so blank. He is so smart. He's a genius, right? So it helps us understand that it's not just a minor thing. It's actually a stronger word there, but it also means it agrees with the clue. It agrees with the clue. So X, that, something else, right? And that tells us there's a really strong relationship between the X and the Y in this particular idiom. We also can sometimes get pivots that are causal relationships. That'll happen occasionally as well, or even, you know, more complicated relationships than that. In other words, they're not exactly opposite or the same, but they explain to us how things go, how things are connected, how one thing causes the other, or how if one thing occurs, then another will also happen. So we also get more complicated relationships as well. But the classic set of pivots are things like however, yet, but that tell us it's the opposite, or so, or a comma, or an and that tells us it's in the same direction. Okay, so what do you guys think? What word should I put in this blank now that we've talked about this problem a lot? Okay, slow. I agree with you. Talkative. Okay. Verbose. I like verbose. Deliberate. So deliberate works. My only problem with deliberate is not necessarily negative. And I think the word lamented tells me I need something negative. So deliberate's a good starting point. And talkative's not necessarily negative either, but talkative and deliberate are both good starting points as long as we recognize that when we look at the answers, you know, there's got to be something negative about it, right? And there's some level to it that's negative. And obviously, you know, verbose isn't necessarily super negative either, but something along those lines that allows us to reach the idea of this is turning into something negative. And I think actually, yeah, the right answer that I had here was verbose, you know, for this particular problem. All right, good job. You guys actually saw this one very, very easily. So let's keep moving. More about pivots. Let's try to figure out the pivot here. What do you guys think? Pivot and clue. Nick's laxity with his children belied his reputation as a blank manager. What does the word belied mean, Jane? What does belied mean? And by the way, that's one of those words that I think we probably don't use a whole lot. I think it's more like an old-fashioned word, like you might run into it in Dickens or Shakespeare or something. We don't use it as much, but the GRE loves it. It shows up all the time on this test. What does belied mean? Okay, yeah, and it's an opposite, definitely. Belied literally means to show that something is a lie, right? Belied is to show that something is a lie. Yeah, and Jignasa's got a good definition of it as well, to give the wrong impression. So what's the clue then? What's the clue? All right, put those two things together, and we need something that's the opposite of laxity. We need something that's the opposite of laxity. I like it. As a strict manager. I'll buy that. Strict manager. Good job. Rigid. Rigid is good too. Yeah, rigid is really good too. Yeah, well done, guys. And so, real quick, just so that we're complete on this, what is the target here? who or what is being described by the blank? What do you guys think? Yeah, it's Nick. This is all about, whoops, let me change that to a different color. This is all about Nick. So if we're going to think about this in terms of the target, we want to see that everything in this sentence is describing Nick. Now, how does that help us? On this problem, not so much. But on a more complicated sentence, understanding precisely who is being described can really help us untease, unravel some difficulties. All right, let's see a different one of these, right? A slightly different one. So we've got the dot-com boom of the 1990s ended abruptly in 2000. Startups that had been venture capitalists' erstwhile darlings proceeded to blank apace. All right, you guys talk to me. What's the clue here? Ended abruptly. Yeah, I'd agree with that, right? The boom ended abruptly. So there's one other thing that I would put in here as, what does the word apace mean? What does that even mean? Any thoughts? This is how the test is hard. That's not really a vocabulary word, is it? Apace. It's not really a vocabulary word. You're not going to find that word probably in a list of vocabulary words. Yeah, and I agree with you, Jignatia, but we'll get there. We'll get to our own filler in just a second. But words like apace, this sort of contextual or idiomatic language, can really be important. So you guys tell me, what do you think apace means? Yeah, Catherine, I'd agree with that. I quickly is probably the simplest way to put that. Yeah. No, not decelerating. Yeah, it's just continuing at a good speed, at a quick speed, right? And so now let's go ahead and put in our filler. And I agree entirely with Jignatia that bombed is probably a good word here. Bombed is probably a good word. Okay, but what we skipped here was the pivot, guys. What we skipped here was the pivot. Was there a good pivot in this sentence? What do you guys think? Yeah, Catherine's got it. That semicolon's what's really important in this sentence. And we want to look out for this sort of connector. We've got, really, if you think about it, two separate sentences here. We have one sentence that tells us that the dot-com boom of the 1990s ended abruptly in 2000. And then really, a semicolon introduces a new sentence. Startups that had been venture capitalists' erstwhile darlings proceeded to bomb. I should put that as bomb, not bombed. I'm screwing up my part of speech. Apologize for that. Bomb or fail or something like that, apace. When we see this sort of a structure, the second sentence is basically matching the first sentence. So the first sentence said, first we had a boom, right? And then that boom ended. First, they were the darlings of venture capitalists, and then they had something bad happen. It's going to match, it's going to mirror that same sort of structure of the first sentence. That is going to get mirrored in the second sentence. But be a little bit careful. There's plenty of problems out there that go semicolon, however, comma. So which takes precedent here? If I give you this one, semicolon, however, is this semicolon same side, or is this however opposite side? Yeah, the however kind of wins here. The however kind of wins. The semicolon's there to tell us the grammatical structure. And if we don't add any other words to it, then that's telling us that the structure is going to be repeated in the second sentence. But as soon as we add a word like however, yet, but, nevertheless, well, that takes precedent. Then the semicolon is just acting as grammar. It's not acting in a meaningful way. All right, good job. And they do that a lot. Semicolon, however, semicolon, yet. For those of you guys who are kind of thinking to yourself, what are all these pivots? The handout that I'm going to email you guys after class today has a list of the more common ones. And it's actually 3 different lists. There's a list of the most common opposite point pivots, the most common same-side pivots, and also the most common, although this is a shorter list, of the kind of weird ones, the things that are causal or conditional or other sorts of relationships like that. Okay, questions so far. This is all pretty straightforward, right? All right, moving onward. Let's talk a little bit more about step 3, about comparing each answer choice. Let's go through the whole process here, though. So let's read the sentence. The extremist youth groups that terrorized local towns during the Civil War have lain dormant for years, but now seem frighteningly. Okay, I think in this case it's probably easiest to start with a pivot. What's the pivot? What do you guys think? Yeah, I've got this but, right? And that's telling me it's the opposite. And I would also include the word now, but now. But now. That might actually be pretty important. Okay, so what else? What else? I get this but now. That tells me that there's a time change, right? So what used to happen? But now something's happening, tells me this is new. Yeah, they were dormant, have lain dormant for years. Good. Yeah. And also, they terrorize local towns. So there's 3 levels to this. First, they terrorized the local towns. That was during the Civil War. Then they lay dormant for years. Okay? And now they are something else. So there's almost 3 separate things going on. Almost 3 separate things going on. What's the target? Who are we talking about? Yeah, the target, everything in the sentence is describing the target of extremist youth groups. That's every single part of the sentence. So that's good. That's good that we recognize that. Okay, we've got our clues, we've got our pivot, we've got our target, right? We need to write our own fill-in. What would you guys say? They now seem frighteningly what? I like it. Active. And militant, Jane, makes sense because they're extremist youth groups. But does militant make sense in this structure of they used to terrorize local towns, then they were dormant, but now they are? I like active because it goes very, very directly to this concept of they used to be dormant, but now they're active. Militant works as well, as long as we read militant as meaning they're doing something, they're actively pursuing their goals. Does that make sense to everybody? Why I like active a lot, because it goes directly counter to the word dormant, and that really is. I mean, I've got a couple of different things highlighted here as our clues, but really the core clue here is they were dormant, now they are the opposite of dormant. We're looking for the opposite of dormant. Okay, and of course, compare each answer to our choice, to our own filler, and we're going to mark our paper. All right, does Pacific mean active? What do you guys think? Yes, no, maybe, or question mark? Okay, Pacific means peaceful. Does timid mean active? Timid, what do you guys think? Okay, how about recrudescent? All right, that's definitely a question mark. How about recapitulatory? Okay, mostly question marks. We'll come back to that. How about recriminatory? All right, mostly question marks. Okay, let's pause here. Let's pause here for a second. And it doesn't actually mean like being a criminal again, although it sounds like it should be. It doesn't actually mean that. And if it meant that, it probably would be the answer. It probably would be the answer. But so what should I do here? Should I spend the next 5 minutes trying to decide which of these 3 words I don't know is correct? What should I do? What should I do? There's really only one blank in this problem. I need to be doing this faster than 1.5 minutes. I need to be doing this one probably close to 1 minute in terms of time, so that I have a little bit more than 1.5 minutes to do the problems that have 2 and 3 blanks. Yeah, I need to do all this good work, recognize that I'm down to a 1 and 3 guess, which is good. I mean, that's better than a 1 and 5 guess, and I want to take my best guess. All right, you got 5 seconds to poll in C, D, or E. Everybody poll in your guess right now, C, D, or E. Okay, and we got, let's see, we got 2 C's and 3 D's. 2 C's and 3 D's. And it turns out recrudescent is the correct answer, because recrudescent means something is breaking out again or starting up again. And it's usually used in a medical context, as in, you know, that medical problem that this person had is recrudescent. They had it before and it's coming back again. But it can also be used in a sense of things that don't have anything to do with unhealthy. Recapitulatory has to do with giving something a new meaning or summarizing something. So recapitulate is the verb form, and recapitulate means to briefly summarize, or it means in a biological sense to appear to repeat. And so this is just the adjective form of it. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this phrase, but this is something that's very famous in biology. Ontogeny recapitulates. Oh, now I've forgotten the third part of it. Phylogeny. That's the kind of classic phrase in evolutionary biology. I don't know if you guys have ever run into that phrase before, but that simply means that the form an animal takes as it goes from being, you know, in the womb or in the egg, the form it takes as it develops into an adult animal retells the story of its evolutionary history. And it turns out that that's not necessarily always true, but that was something that was thought for a long time. But recapitulate in that sense is used in the biological sense of appearing to repeat. And then the final one, recriminatory. Jignasha took a good guess on that it meant to become a criminal again. But it doesn't actually mean that. Anybody know recriminatory? All right, I'm going to take the deafening silence as a no. Recriminatory means, you know, relating to an accusation to another person. So once again, this is a word that we probably more commonly see in its verb form, which is recriminate. And recriminate is you tell the cops I did something. I recriminate by telling them that you did something. So it's making an accusation in response. So a countering accusation. You said I stole the cookies. No, I think you stole the cookies. That's recrimination. And recriminatory would just be the adjective form here. And that doesn't really make sense. But the big point I want to get across here is not whether or not you guys knew the words here. The big point I want to make is when you're down to words you don't know, just guess with what's left. Don't spend a lot of time on them. Don't spend a lot of time trying to figure them out. If you don't know them, take your best shot. This test rewards that. If you can, you know, get the easy and medium questions correct, And then on some of the harder ones, you don't get them all correct, but you get yourself down to a 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3 guess on some really hard problems, and you don't waste too much time doing that. That's going to help you out in the long run, because compared to the other people taking the test, you are first off going to get a half or a third of those problems right, but you're also going to leave yourself enough time to really, really get correct the problems that you're able to get correct. That's the sort of logic there. So do your best with the sentence, but when you reach a point where you don't know how to proceed, you just have to guess and move on. And that is totally fine. And not just totally fine, expect that that's going to happen several times a test. That's completely normal, and that's actually a good thing. You're doing well if you're doing that. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the clue. They got to give us a clue. It's a standardized test. They have to tell us what goes in the blank, and they're not going to tell us what goes in the blank in a way that is kind of a judgmental thing, or it could be this or it could be that. It's something that is, they can argue, guarantees the meaning of the word, the answer that they've said is correct. It should never be something along the lines where, oh, it could be this answer or it could be that answer, we just don't know for sure. No. If it's on the GRE, if it's on a standardized test, they're going to have to tell you directly what goes in that blank. And so that means you have to demand a clue. You've got to demand that every sentence has a clue, which means if you're not seeing a clue in it, it's not their mistake. Make yourself find it. Make yourself find the clue. Don't just read the sentence and assume you know what it means, because then you're bringing in your own feelings and your own bias. So let's see an example of that. Oh, wait, let me, before I switch over to the next screen, let me cover up the bottom part from you guys real quick. So really the point I want to make about the next screen is this idea that we really want to make sure that we find the clue. So let's look at this sentence now. Graduating from grad school is a blank time for many students who blah, 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 blah. So your own personal bias, what do you think happens when people graduate from grad school? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? So probably we would be looking for something like, it's a happy time, it's an exciting time, it's a wonderful time, it's a time for a sense of achievement and accomplishment. Okay, but let me show you the sentence down here. Let me show you what that sentence looks like if we go ahead and we take a look at the entire thing that we left off at the bottom. Graduating from grad school is a blank time for many students, comma, who face a deepening recession and ever-growing levels of student debt. Now what do you guys think? Is happy, exciting still a good answer? Now what kind of answer should we use? I don't think crucial is negative enough. I like scary, actually. I think scary is really good. I think the word I've got here is, yeah, worrisome. It's a worrisome time for many students. The point I want to make about this is, until we actually read this part, right, who face a deepening recession and ever-growing levels of student debt, until we got down to that part of the sentence, we weren't actually sure what should go in the blank. It's very, very, very tempting, right? It's very, very tempting to dive right in and pick a filler that sounds good, that sounds nice, that agrees with our own feelings. But we don't want to do that until we're 100% sure we understand fully what the sentence means. And of course, that doesn't happen until, number one, we've read the whole sentence, but number two, we've identified within the sentence, what the clues, pivots, and maybe the target are. Until we do that, we can't really be certain about what we want to fill in there. All right, questions about that at all? And honestly, I'm never worried that people don't read the whole sentence. I know you guys are going to read the whole sentence. Here's what I do worry that people do. I worry people assume. I worry people add their own ideas to the sentence. That's what I worry about. That's what I see people do all the time. Add in their own biases, their own personal ideas, their own assumptions about how the world works. You can't do that. You just have to go with precisely what the actual sentence says. Okay, so let's keep practicing this. So let's try this one out. I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to read this sentence, and when we're done, ding in, and we'll get somebody on the microphone to tell me what the clue is, what the pivot is. Well, maybe. I would say in at least one respect is just sort of setting the background for it. It doesn't really exactly tell me whether the blank agrees or disagrees with the clue. I mean, Catherine's saying the semicolon again. I think I would agree with that. There's a semicolon here. What's the clue? Okay, more likely. We can think of that as a pivot, especially because we have this more something, blah, blah, blah. Semicolon. They are more something, blah, blah, blah. Right? In other words, I've got this parallel sentence structure between these two sentences. So I think that semicolon is telling us that the filler definitely agrees with the clue. What's the clue? Perceive others' motives accurately. I agree 100%. The clue here is they are more likely to perceive others' motives accurately. So I need a word that means the same thing as perceive others' motives accurately. And by the way, guys, what's the target? What's the target here? Yeah, we're just talking about the senior managers. Okay, so I'm getting intuitive. I'm getting insightful. Anybody else? And I would say that intuitive and insightful both work really, really well. Intuitive, insightful. But accurate in what way? I'm worried about accurate here because there's many things we can be accurate about. I think accurate's important, but what's the real key word in the clue that is exactly the right word to use? What do you guys think? Yeah, I like perceptive personally. In fact, I've got perceptive down here. And this is the idea that I can just recycle what they told me. And here's the point I want to make about this. The whole job of this fill-in is to help me compare the answers. The job of this fill-in isn't to give me a chance to show off to anybody how good my vocabulary is. That doesn't matter. What matters is that the fill-in is there to help me test out the answer choices. That's really it. So there's no reason to use fancy vocab words here. In fact, here's something you could have done with this one. Just recycle the whole phrase. They are generally more able to perceive others' motives. That would be a great fill-in. And then I just look at the words and I go, which of these means able to perceive others' motives? In other words, don't make it too hard on yourself. Use whatever fill-in, completes the meaning, but in a way that's useful to you. So if you saw it as intuitive or insightful, that's great. But if you saw it as perceptive or just the whole phrase repeating, able to perceive others' motives, that's great too, because the point of the fill-in isn't to guess the right answer. The point of the fill-in is to describe what sort of word the right answer should look like so that we can eliminate the wrong answers. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at these answer choices then. Fortunate, is that a keeper or a get rid of? How about quotidian? What does quotidian mean? I've got some no's, some question marks. Caitlin, what does quotidian mean? You gave me a no. Oh, Catherine already gave it to me. Yeah, no worries, no worries. It's going to happen a bunch. Quotidian means happening every day, but it actually means in a dull way, right? It's just normal, average, every day, and it sort of has that extra meaning sometimes of being boring. Okay, how about intrepid? What do you think? Keep or throw? What does intrepid mean? Anybody? Intrepid? Yeah, fearless. How about garrulous? Garrulous. So what does that one mean? Ignacio is saying no. What does that mean? Yeah, talkative. Probably the simplest way to put down a definition for garrulous. And finally, perspicacious. You guys ever seen that word before? All right, the more common form of the word that we're more likely to run into is perspicacity, which is the noun form. Perspicacity just means perceptiveness, cleverness, right? That's all it means. But perspicacious, being the adjective form, means pretty much the same thing as perceptive. But here's the important part. If we got rid of the first four and we had no idea what perspicacious means, what are we doing? I've got 4 X's and a question mark. What answer am I picking? Yeah, 4 X's and a question mark. I'm picking the answer with a question mark, even if I'm a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, and you guys are all saying to yourselves, why does Ian keep hammering this point home? Of course I'm going to pick the answer if I know the other 4 are wrong. But let me tell you, guess what I see people pick on this problem all the time? I see people talk themselves into fortunate all of the time. They go, I don't know what perspicacious means. I don't want to pick it. Let's go back and look at these. Oh, maybe it's fortunate because they're a senior manager, right? And isn't it better to be a senior manager than it is to be a middle manager? They must be lucky. That's me bringing in my own biases. That's the point of coming up with our own fill-in, so that we don't just pick an answer that sort of half makes sense. Are senior managers generally more fortunate than middle managers? Maybe. I don't know. It has nothing to do with the second part of the sentence that contains the clue. It has nothing to do with perceive others' motives accurately. So I want to be able to get rid of fortunate, say it's wrong, and then if I have to guess one of the ones I don't know, that's better than talking myself into fortunate simply because it sounds like it kind of makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? And that's the problem people run into. They miss the clue. They miss the clue. So if I was to cover up the clue here for a second and just say, in at least one respect, senior managers are generally more blank than middle managers, what word am I picking? Are they braver than middle managers? Are they more fortunate than middle managers? Do they talk more than middle managers? Are they more perceptive than middle managers? Are they more boring than middle managers, right? Maybe you guys have had a boring boss. Any of them could work, and so we would only be picking an answer based on our own personal bias of what we think it means to be a senior manager. Don't do that. Find the clue. They are more likely to perceive others' motives accurately. Now I know the answer has to be something about perception. All right, here's what we're doing. I am going to give you guys 5 minutes on this page. There are 5 problems. There are 5 of us. So you can kind of guess everybody's going to probably get called on once here. But take a look at these 5 sentences and try to find the clues and the pivots, and most importantly, see if you can write down a good fill-in for each of these. And I'm going to put 5 minutes up on the board, and when we're done, we'll talk about them. Good luck. Okay, how did those go? Do you guys feel like you were able to come up with good fillers for each of these? Give me a smiley face if you did. Okay, mostly smiley faces all around. I'm going to get people on the mic. We haven't heard your voices yet. So Catherine, hop on the mic and talk to me about okay, no worries. So Catherine, start typing for me the very first one. So what were the clues? What were the pivot? What filler did you come up with? And while Catherine's getting started on typing the first one, Jignasha, if you've got a mic, hop on the mic and start talking to us on the mic about the second one.
Hi all. Hi, can you all hear me? Hi. Okay, now for the second one, the pivot is that her pre-natural powers allowed her to dash the future events. And the clues are catalysms and illnesses to global booms and now, as we see here, the radio host claimed to have preternatural powers. So that means he's kind of predicting something here. So I think the first clue here should be the radio host claimed to have preternatural powers that allowed her to dash future events. So I think that points to predict future events. And from catalysms and illnesses to global booms, and so it's basically describing the kind of things he used to predict. So that is catalysms and illnesses to global booms, and I think personal predictions. So again, predictions there in the second blank.
All right, and I think I agree with you on the first blank, but I've got a little bit of a disagreement on the second blank. And I think it came down to the pivot for the second blank is actually this idiomatic phrase, from cataclysms and illnesses to global booms and personal whatever, right? So cataclysms are a global negative, but illnesses are just a personal negative. So if we're going to go from big negative and small negative to big positive, what does the blank need to be? It needs to be a personal what? Okay, but is it good or bad? Is it positive or negative? Yeah, it's got to be something positive, right? Personal achievements or personal triumphs. And it all comes from that idiomatic phrase, personal successes. That's good also. That idiomatic phrase, from blah, blah, blah to blah, blah, blah. And actually, if I'm going to be really matter-of-fact about it, the and within each of my pairs of things is also a pivot. Global booms and something else that's also positive. Does that make sense to everybody? That kind of from big negative and small negative to big positive, it's got to be a personal positive as well. All right, let's see, Catherine, how are you coming along on the first one? All right, so target beliefs. Yeah, lest our beliefs become. I'd agree with that. So let's see. The clue, beliefs must be reconsidered and dynamically reflect the times in which we live. Yeah, reconsider, also dynamically reflect. And then the opposite of reconsidered, yeah, and I think that the pivot there, yeah, lest our beliefs, but also the rather than. And let's see, Catherine's giving us static or unchangeable. I agree 100%. Static is great. That's a great word to use there. Questions about the first one? Anybody have any problems with that or questions? Okay, Jane, take the third one.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes, okay, good. Okay, so in her later years, the artist eschewed the wild, chaotic imagery of her early work and instead embraced a prim, highly blank formalism. So the target is the artist, or actually, sorry, the blank is describing her work. So I kind of messed up. So the artist's work, yeah. And the clue, I would say, is is the wild, chaotic imagery, and then prim and formalism. And then the pivot, I would say, instead embraced. So I actually couldn't think of a good word for it, but something that's like the opposite of wild or chaotic would be the word I would choose.
How about just saying prim? Honestly, prim would work pretty good for that. We could also say, yeah, somebody said tamed or organized. That works good too. Tamed or organized. Formal would work as well. Yeah, good job. The only thing I think that you might have missed is I probably would have included as a pivot eschewed, which means giving up. So first the artist gave up this wild, chaotic imagery, and then later on embraced a prim, highly something formalism. We're looking for a word that means the opposite of wild and chaotic, and the same as prim and formal. Good job. Very good job, Jane. All right, Emma, you're up. The fourth one. Okay, so start typing, and Caitlin, if you can get on the mic, tell us about the fifth one while Emma types in the fourth one.
Hi, everyone. For the fifth one, I felt the blanks were describing Melissa's date, and the clues to how he was acting would be surly, and maybe Marissa's reaction is him being tedious. And because of that, I thought the pivot was the colon. And so, sorry, the semicolon. The words I used were polite and, oh, can't even read my own writing. Polite and interesting.
Well done. The only thing I would add to that is that we've also got the pivot of neither nor, which actually matters a lot because we need to say that he was neither polite. If he's surly, he's neither polite. And that's actually important because if we leave out the neither nor, then we would want to say Melissa's date was rude and boring. He was surly to the waiter and tedious, right? So that actually ends up, those sort of things make a big difference. Because of the words you chose, I know that you knew that sort of intuitively. Very intuitively you knew that, so you weren't going to miss it, but it's good to still just train our eyes to spot that stuff so that as we get into really complicated sentences where it's hard to kind of intuitively understand what they mean, we have another path we can follow, another path that allows us to still get the words by kind of doing it in a little more of a I don't know what the right word is for that, but a little more of a mechanical way. All right, and Emma's giving us the fourth one, the clues, perpetual fear of his reproof. Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Perpetual fear of his reproof. And then the pivot, the semicolon for sure, and also the idea that not just one thing, but positively another. And I like that. I think that's a good set of words. He's not just mean, he's positively overbearing. The one thing I'd say is that when we get this not just one thing, but positively another, chances are good that which word's stronger? Yeah, so I would just want to make sure that when I look for the answers that I'm going to pay attention to the idea that probably the second word needs to be stronger than the first. Mean and overbearing work great, but maybe I want to think about I need something that's even stronger for the second one. But once again, the point of doing these fillers is simply to put us on the right track to do the answers. So well done, guys. You guys had no problems with these at all. You guys were able to handle these without any trouble. I'm happy to see that. And I want to kind of very quickly just take a look at two of the sentence patterns for these problems. So we have that, you know, not just one thing but also, or but even, or but positively in this case. Those idioms mean that the two words agree with each other. They are the same direction. If one's positive, the other's positive. If one's negative, the other's negative. But the second one is probably a stronger version of the first. Now this is confusing to people sometimes because they see the words not and but. That sometimes tricks people, but the real key word here is actually the word not, the phrase not just. Let me give you another phrase. Not blank, but blank. In this case, are the two blanks the same or are they opposites? We got some disagreement here. Yeah, they're actually opposites in this case. So think about how big a difference this one word makes. Not just one thing but another, or but also another, or but even another, or but positively another. Not just one thing but another. That word just tells me that they're the same. But here I get not one thing but another, and now these guys do not equal each other, right? They are not the same. They're exact opposites. If that's positive, then this is negative. All right, questions about that at all? The point I'm trying to make here is that sometimes the most important things in the sentence are the littlest things. And then we also get the one that Caitlin handled for us at the end about Marissa's date. And we didn't explicitly say this, but I want to explicitly say it now. If they give us a list of things, the list has to stay in the same order. Now, in real life, we don't do that. We don't do that. So a good writer varies things up. A good writer might say Marissa's date was neither interesting nor polite. He was surly to the waiter and blah, 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 blah. A good writer might vary things up, but the GRE doesn't do that. They're going to have the first blank here relate to the first thing in the sentence, and the second blank relate to the second thing. And they're always going to follow the same order. And that's nice. That makes our lives a little bit simpler. All right, questions so far? Okay, let's make things a little bit harder. Here we go, 3 blanks. You guys have 30 seconds to read the sentence and 30 seconds to come up with your pivots, clues, and fillers. So 1 minute total. Good luck. Okay, do you guys feel confident that you understood the sentence? Give me a smiley face if you feel like you really understood the sentence well. The point I want to make with this problem is that when there's one blank, we know what order to go in. When there's two blanks, usually one of the blanks is easier to work with, and we want to do that first. When there's three blanks, there's probably a couple of different ways we could get from an understanding of the sentence on a broader level to an understanding of what words should go in the blank. And we want to really think about how we work our way to those blanks. Here's the quick summary of everything I'm about to say. The quick summary of everything I'm about to say is go with the easier blanks first. And the easier blanks are easier because they have the best clues. So which of these blanks do you think has the clearest, most absolutely directly to the blank clue? What do you guys think? Okay, first, Catherine says, Emma says the last one. Ooh, and this will sometimes honestly be different for different people, because personally I would have said the second one. I would have said the second one. All right, but now we're getting Jane's agreeing with Emma. Okay, so let's go with the last one first. Appointing leaders do more to blank than to merit. So we have this sort of phrase, do more to one thing than to, and what's my clue? So I need something that's the opposite of merit, but we're talking about appointing leaders. Yeah, I like that. I like what you guys are saying. So favoritism is good. Politics is good. Maybe it's even how long the person serves. So tenure, we don't know for sure. Okay, now that we know that's in place, is the general making numerous tactical good things or bad things? So we've got a couple of people saying bad. Jignasha saying can't say for sure yet. Okay, let's go to the second blank then. A couple of people saying bad, but a couple of people saying can't say for sure. We'll come back to that. His forces over too wide an area, okay, underestimating the effects of inclement weather, okay, too wide an area. Are these good things or bad things? Is underestimating a good thing or, yeah. So now I'm feeling more confident that I'm able to go back and say that he made numerous tactical, maybe mistakes. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you like mistakes, errors, problems, right? Now I need the second blank. And personally for me, this was the easiest blank because I think the clue, including blank his forces over too wide an area, I think too wide an area is really good. But other people might not see it that way. But I do agree here with what Jane is saying, spreading out his forces over too wide an area. The point I want to make is each of us might have a different path in our understanding of the sentence to get from one point to the other. But even though each of us might have a slightly different path our mind follows, all of us need to take a path. And what I mean by that is don't try to do everything all at once. If you try to do it all at once, your brain's not smart enough to keep up with you. And don't try to do everything all at once. Follow a path. Go from one blank that you know to the next blank that you know to the next one, and use the words that you're plugging into those blanks to help you out with the other blanks. Use your fillers as clues for the other blanks. So once again, it's less important the exact path that you follow, but it is important that you follow a path, that you go from a starting point to a finishing point, and you don't try to expect yourself to just see the whole thing at once. This is more like a puzzle, and you got to do work to solve the puzzle. You're not just going to see it right from the beginning. All right, so that was 3 blanks. 2 to 3 blanks are common on the test. There's probably as many 2 to 3 blanks as there are 1 blank. They might seem harder because they're longer. That's probably even true. You also don't get partial credit But on the other hand, you're going to get, in a longer sentence, more clues to help you out, and you're also only going to get 3 choices per blank instead of 5. So on your paper, here's what you would want to do. Okay, for the first one, I don't know one of these words, I like another one, and I don't like the other one. Okay, so I'm probably picking that. On this one, I don't like 2 of them, and I like the other one. Okay, so I'm probably, in the end, going to come here and pick taciturn and real. But the point is, on our own paper, to mark our take, our idea, our thoughts about every single answer. On our own paper, mark that out. And the reason why we want to do that is so that we can't get tricked, that we don't fall into a mistake, we don't mismark the answer. All of these things can happen to us if we don't have a good process in place. But if we follow a good process and we really mark on our paper what our calls are for each of the answers, then we're going to be much better off. And if it's a 3 by 3, so a 3 blank with 3 answers each, we'll make almost like a tic-tac-toe board. And then we'll mark, once again, each of those answers. We'll mark it whether or not we think that it's good or bad, or maybe, or an I don't know if we don't know the meaning. Think about, though, what this means. When there's 5 blanks, if you have no idea, you've got a 1 in 5 guess. What are your odds of getting one that has 2 blanks correct if you have no idea at all, if you just have to randomly guess? Anybody remember their probability combinatorics? Anybody remember? If you're independently guessing, right, these are 2 independent lists of answers. If you're independently guessing from 2 lists of 3, well, you can pick 3 answers in the second blank for each of the 3 in the first blank. So this is actually a 1 out of 9 guess. That's terrible. On the other hand, if you know one of the words, if you know one of the 2 blanks, and then you're guessing from amongst the 3 on the other, that's down to a 1 in 3 guess. So actually, when there's 2 blanks there, if you do no good work at all, then you've got a worse chance than you do with the 5 blanks. But if you take the time to try to find the clues and the pivot, you should be at least able to narrow things down. And because there's a total of fewer words per blank than there are in the 5 blank ones, the 1 blank ones with 5 answers, you actually can do a better job of putting yourself in position to guess well. All right, and by the way, not to scare everybody, but this one over here, that's a 1 in 27 guess if all you're doing is guessing. You're probably not going to get it right just randomly guessing. But on the other hand, if you can work your way through at least 1 or 2 of the blanks, you can really narrow down the number of guesses. And that's what we're looking at. We're not going to get every problem right. We're not going to know every word, but that's okay. If we can narrow things down, we'll tilt the odds back into our favor. All right, so when we've got these 2 or 3 blanks, we still want to start with the easier blank, just like we did. So I'm going to give you guys a minute to work this problem, and then we'll talk about it. And the one clue I'll give you is figure out which of the blanks is easier because it has more clues, and then use that to help you decide. And when you're done with the entire problem, pull in A, B, or C for the first blank, for your thoughts on the first blank. Okay, don't have answers from many people. Pull in an A, B, or C just for the first blank. Just for the first blank. All right, starting to get some more answers come in. Caitlin, hop on the mic. Talk to me. Which blank did you start with?
I started with the first blank, and I just took whatever was going to be the opposite of ambitious.
Why the opposite of ambitious?
Because of what the rest of the sentence says about admission for the kindergartners. And so it just made sense that they were going to be not quite as gung-ho as they could have been because of the rest of the sentence.
Okay, I like it. I like it. Not as gung-ho. How about the second blank? Did anybody start with the second blank first? So, Catherine, I know you don't have a mic, but maybe type in for me what clue, what filler, all of that good stuff. I like it, keeping it simple. They're not polite. And then we're just going to go through and we're going to test these out. Now, whichever one you started with, Caitlin started with the first blank, and Catherine started with the last blank, and I don't know where the other three people in the class were, but that's okay. Whichever one you started with, that's the one that you want to try to figure out the filler for, and then use that to help you work back to the other blank, or forwards, as the case may be. That's kind of the logic here, starting with the easier blank and then using it as an extra clue. So this right here kind of assumes that we started with the second one, but we could have gone the other direction as well. It would have worked both ways. And in the end, our first one, we don't want to be gung-ho, so we need something that means the opposite of being really gung-ho about something. Does ebullience mean that? No, ebullience means full of, like, energy and happiness. Does trepidation mean that? Trepidation we saw earlier just means, we saw intrepid, which means fearless. Trepidation just is from the same root, but it means having a lot of fear, where trepidation is fear itself. And then apoplexy. What does apoplexy mean? All right, let's look at the second one. What does artless mean? Yeah, lacking culture, lacking skill. Culture in the sense of art is not correct. Artless doesn't mean lacking art. Well, it does, but it means art in the sense of skill, not like painting. So, Catherine, I agree lacking culture, but only if you mean culture in sort of a broader sense and not in the pure sense of just unable to make music or unable to draw pictures. Artless really means crude, I think, is a really good definition for artless, right? Lacking skill or ability. Crude. Does that work here? Yeah, probably not. How about lucid? What does lucid mean? One meaning is sane, absolutely. What else? Yeah, awareness in the sense of clearness of thought. Clear is probably the simplest synonym for it. That doesn't work. How about pugnacious? All right, so that was a question mark for a lot of people. All right, so given this, we're picking probably B for the first one, right? And I'll tell you guys what apoplexy means. Apoplexy means, let me even put it in simpler terms, rage. If you're apoplectic, you're so angry you can't even think. You're so angry that you're just screaming, right? That's apoplexy. Much stronger than just being angry, like a rage. So that's actually not a good answer for this one, and that's why B is appropriate. Out of our XX question mark, what do we have to pick if we've got XX question mark? got to pick pugnacious. Yeah, and Catherine's giving us the definition there. Pugnacious means aggressive. Sort of, the way I always remember this is think about that dog, the pugs, right? I don't know if they're actually aggressive, but think about dogs. Maybe that'll help you, maybe not. But yeah, it has to do with, it actually comes from the same root as pugilist, which is a fancy name for a boxer. A boxer or other fighter is a pugilist. So pugnacious, same root, has to do with fighting. Questions about that one at all? So think about the process here. We're working from one blank to the other. We're starting with whichever blank seems to have a better clue. And whichever blank seems to have the better clue, that's what we want to start with. And then use that to help us figure out the other blank. All right, I'm going to show you guys another problem. And once again, I'm going to give you a minute. And when you're done, ring in with what you're picking for the first blank. And I'll give you a clue. There's a trap here. We call it a theme trap. Good luck. It's a tough one. I think it's actually tough enough just to tease out the meaning of the sentence. Starting to get some answers ringing in. Jane, why don't you hop on the mic and talk to us about this one?
Okay, so, or can everyone hear me first of all? Yes, miss. Okay. So first of all, I started with the first one, and I used is lost on. This definition is lost on. Those who blank use the word to refer to a limit or boundary. And so I thought actually, I don't know if, yeah, so basically I thought that the blank would be someone or something like mistakenly, or someone who doesn't understand the first part of the sentence, what it actually means. So my blank was mistakenly.
I love it. I love it. And then given that the first blank is mistakenly used the word, then the second blank, well, we are, the similar sounding perimeter. Is perimeter the correct or incorrect word to use? Yeah, that's what we're getting at. An idea, right, that is more conveyed, right? So probably for the second blank, something like correctly. What do you think? Do you guys agree with me there? All right, and then we just have to go through these. Erroneously, does that mean mistakenly? I'm going to go backwards this time. Erroneously. Is that the same as mistaken? Couple of yeses. How about didactically? Was that a question mark for you guys? Didactic? Yeah, I thought so. Okay. That's a hard word. And then finally, numerically. Numerically. Yeah, definitely not numerically. And then we need, for the second blank, the word correct. Does skeptically mean correctly? How about quantitatively? How about aptly? Okay, so given this lineup, we have to choose aptly. Would you guys agree? And now we need to take a look at the first one, and we're choosing between erroneously, which matches pretty well the word we came up with, versus a word we don't know the meaning of. If we've got question mark check, which one are we picking? Yeah, if we like it, we got to go with it, even if there's another word we don't know. The real, if it's check versus question mark, of course you pick the question mark. Sorry, X versus question mark. If it's check versus question mark, of course you pick the check. The hard ones are the ones that end up looking like this, where you've got one that, it sort of works, but it's not quite right, versus this one's just flat out, I don't know what it means. All right, didactically. Nobody knew that one? Did anybody know didactically at all? All right, give us the definition, Catherine. Yeah, didactic means intending to teach, so didactically means done in such a way as intending to instruct. Mostly it has a neutral meaning. Occasionally it's used in a positive way, and occasionally it's used in a negative way. So how it would be used in a negative way is that friend of yours that that always lectures you about stuff you either don't care about or or already knew. They could be being very didactic, and it could be a negative thing. But usually it's a fairly neutral term. It just means intended to teach or instruct. So what was the trap here? The trap here was that there's a theme trap in place. So a theme trap is when they use words related to the sentence in the answer choices that has nothing to do with the blank, but makes a lot of sense to people because of the overall meaning of the sentence. So in this case, I think there's one word in the first set of answers and one word in the second set of answers that are really good theme traps. What do you guys think? What are they? What are the theme traps here? Yeah, numerically, because we're talking about mathematics and statistics, and also quantitatively here, because we're talking once again about math and statistics. And then we've also got parameter, perimeter, technical definition, all those sorts of things. Watch out for these theme traps. They show up a lot. They show up a lot on the test, and we want to avoid them as much as possible. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here by trying one more problem out. And this problem also has two more traps in it that I want you guys to learn about. But first off, let's just do the problem. 1 minute again. Good luck. Okay, I've got answers from a couple of people, but not from everybody. So one of the things I want you guys to get good at is start making good guesses if you are stuck. So Emma, I know you don't have a microphone here, but why don't you type for me, what did you think the clue was, pivot, all that good stuff, target if there is one? Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, exactly. I'd add belied, and I'd actually add something to the clue as well, affable. I'd say affable is another clue as well. Amiable and affable. What do these words mean, amiable and affable? Are these good words or are they bad words? Yeah, they're good words. They mean friendly, nice, pleasant to be around. So the blank here needs to be the opposite of that. So what's our filler then? What's a good filler for this one? What do you guys think? We need something of, yeah, not friendly. I'm just going to go with not friendly. Okay, now here's the thing. Not friendly. Does vengeful mean not friendly? Why not? Doesn't vengeful, if someone's, yeah, it's pretty extreme. I don't know, I might keep it the first time through, but yeah, it seems very extreme. How about pessimistic? Maybe, okay, let's hold on to it. How about jocund? Okay, there's our question mark. How about standoffish? All right, so standoffish, I'm getting yeses from everybody. Let's keep it. How about cordial? Cordial's the exact opposite, right? Cordial's the exact opposite. Now, does anybody know jocund? Think about J-O-C, joke. Does that help anybody figure out jocund? If I just say joke. Now, English changes spelling sometimes, but this is actually the exact same root as the word joke or jocularity. So jocund means cheerful, but in sort of a funny kind of a way, humorous, right? But cheerful. And that is absolutely the opposite of what we're looking for. It's like cordial is. So now I'm down to 3 answers. And you guys told me you think vengeful is way too strong and pessimistic is just off. And that's exactly the trap that we're looking at, right? Trap that we're looking at. Now, the point here is that vengeful is the correct spin, right? Its spin is good. Spin just means positive or negative. But its strength is all wrong. He's working with children. We're looking for the opposite of friendly. We're not looking for the opposite of saintly, right? Vengeful. He's not killing these children. And then pessimistic's another example where the spin is correct, right? The spin is good, but it doesn't really have anything to do with amiable and affable. So these end up being incorrect. And these end up being good examples of spin traps, where the spin is the correct answer, the correct direction, positive versus negative, but it just doesn't quite work given the meanings of the rest of the sentence. Remember, knowing that we need the opposite of affable and amiable means we need a negative word, and that's a good starting point, but that's not going to get us the final answer. And then the other big trap that I wanted you guys to see in this is the reversal trap. And the reversal trap is you miss a pivot and you pick the exact opposite of the correct answer. So the 2 answers here that are reversal traps would be jocund and cordial, right? Both of those kind of make sense as working with amiable and affable. And so if we miss a pivot, we could get sucked into one of these problems. So 2 good traps to watch out for. All right, so that is it for text completions, right? Our basic approach of reading only the sentence and taking the time to process the sentence and understand it and find those clues and pivots, and if it's helpful, finding the target as well. That's important. And then we're going to use those clues and pivots to figure out what our fill-in is. And I think this is the key. If you get good at writing good fill-ins, you get good at answering questions. If you don't, then you get some of them right because you intuitively understood it, but you get them wrong when they get harder. We want to put ourselves in a position where even when they're difficult, we're able to still work our way mechanically through a process that gets us there. So writing fill-ins, right? Anything that gets the idea across. If we need to recycle stuff, go for it. With the 2 to 3 blanks, just like we saw, we want to start with the easier of the blanks, and the easier really comes from which one has better clues. And finally, when we're eliminating, make a mark for every single answer choice. Even if you're sure it's wrong, mark down on your paper an X. Don't let yourself get confused later on in a problem with bad note-taking. If you've eliminated everything else, guess an unknown. And by the way, final point to make is don't waste too much time here. If you've got it down to 2 and you don't know what they mean, who cares? Pick it and move on. You'll get the next one right. And a 50-50 shot, and maybe you'll get that one right too. All right, all about process. That's our focus right now, all about having an approach that gets us from start to finish. Okay, any questions you guys might have? Catherine, yeah, when you're practicing right now, what I want you guys to do is time yourself counting up. So what that means is start a timer, do the problem, stop the timer when you're done. Or maybe do that with a set of, let's say, 5 or 6 questions in a row and time how long the entire set took you. Because what really matters isn't how long you take on any individual problem. What matters is that on average you take around a minute and a half. Probably a little bit less because the reading comp takes longer. So probably closer to a minute 15. Maybe a minute if there's 1 blank, a minute 15 if there's 2 or 3 blanks. But you want to see how you're doing in terms of time on average. That means if you run into a hard one, you can spend a minute and a half or a minute 45 on it if it's likely to help you get it right. And then you make that time up because you find an easy 1 blank one that you do in 45 seconds. But yeah, right now I would definitely be timing myself counting up. And that just means I'm not worried about the time. I start the timer, I do a series of problems, and then I write down how long they took me. So I have a good idea of how long I'm spending. Later on, as we're getting into doing more and more time sets, we're going to have the counter going down from 30 minutes down to 0 minutes because we want to get more and more focused on, hey, I'm not getting it, cut bait, move along. But to begin with, if you're running too long, don't just give up. Keep repeating the problem, but also note the point at which you've probably spent too long and you should have guessed. All right, long answer to a short question, as you guys will discover I'm very good at. So the takeaway here is time yourself by counting up and mark down how long they take you to start out, and then later on we'll time down to make sure that we are strict with ourselves. Other questions before we take a short break? All right, we're going to dive into some really cool math refresher stuff here in just a minute, but let's take a short break, maybe 5 minutes, and then when we come back, Liz is going to work through some math stuff with you guys.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. This is Liz. Let's get started on math. Now, the first thing I want to do is get this whole calculator issue out of the way. All right, many people have this sort of false sense of security due to this calculator. How much of an impact do you think the calculator has? How many questions do you think you can answer just by plugging numbers into your calculator? And they do give you this very simple calculator. Why don't you type back at me just so I can see what you think? What do you think the impact is? What do you guys think? 3, not many, none. Caitlin has it. All right, they know you have a calculator. They bowed to the whole calculator thing, but really, I'm not even going to say they're all that necessary. Okay, really, in many situations, the calculator can be quite misleading. It can lure you into spending a lot of time on computations. There are some things that you can do with the calculator, though, and so I just want to make sure that everyone is familiar with the calculator. Now, if you go into your practice exams, go and click to take as if you're going to take a practice exam. There's a little green button that says calculator. How many of you can get to your student center? Smile at me if you can get to your student center, because I'm fine if you have a calculator open while we do math, okay? Why don't you pop into your student center, and I want you to try this out, okay? I want you to try this little calculator out. It's actually a little better than the calculator that they give you on the real practice test, and I'll explain that later. But try popping into your Student Center, log into your Manhattan GRE Student Center, and under Practice Exams, you will find a green link button, a hot link that just goes to a calculator, and you're welcome to bring that up. All right? Just so everybody knows, it's not going to make that much difference. All right? It will help if you are slow with some calculations, but they do a couple of things. If you pop up this calculator, here, let me pop up some questions for you. It does not have a percent button. So how would you calculate 37% of 2/3 without a percent button? Okay, either you can punch it into your calculator and return the answer, or you can just type it in. All right, it's important that you be familiar with using this calculator. Not that it's going to help you enormously, but I don't want you to sit stuck struggling with it because it's so much simpler than a normal calculator. Okay. All right, smile at me if you have the little calculator up. Nobody has the calculator. Okay, a couple of people have the calculator up. What's the answer then? Pull in the answer. If you have the calculator up, how do you do this? Okay, quickly make sure you're proficient with the calculator. No percent button. Okay, no percent button. All right, no calculator. Okay, now the key is when you punch in, and I'll put the answers up here so you can see it, if you look at this, means times. Okay, this means your times button. Okay, and to do a percent, you just want to make sure the playing field is level here. You do 0.375 times, and put it in parentheses, 2/3. Okay, all right, or you could use 0.667. That'll get you close enough for this. Okay, now, if you have a calculator, you should be able to chug rapidly through this. But what else could you have done? You could have solved this without a calculator. Anybody know what 37.5% is? Anybody know what it is? Yeah, it's 3/8. So if you know your percent equivalence and your fraction to percent equivalence, it may actually be faster to say, okay, that's 3/8 times 2/3, okay, then cancel. All right, this is going to be faster for some people. And get this to 4, and the correct answer is going to be D, all right, or 0.25. So just to get yourself familiar with the calculator, again, I want you to familiarize yourself with it to get comfortable using a calculator without a percent button. It's a very simple calculator, okay? And now we're going to get started on our math review. As I said, it's fine to have that calculator out, all right, because it won't help you on a lot of these problems. It can be handy for some, all right? What will help you, though, all your basic math terms. The GRE uses these words: integer, odd, even, positive, negative, sum, difference, product, quotient, okay, and remainder. All right, probably the trickiest one, sometimes people forget that integers can be 0 or negative, and remainders have to be integers. That's the integer left over after you do division, all right? It's not the decimal left over. How would you calculate if you plugged into your calculator? Say you're dividing, let's see, say you're dividing 8 by 5, okay, If I plug that into my calculator, all right, I say 8 divided by 5, okay, I'm going to get 1.6. How would I calculate the remainder? What's the remainder, guys? Anybody know? How would you calculate the remainder? This is important, all right, because if you're going to use that calculator for these remainder problems, what would you have to do? Anybody know? You can type it in. You can type it in. The remainder is 3. Do you know how to calculate it mathematically? Yeah. Jignasha has it, the 0.6 times 5, okay? Now you need to be able to do that, all right? And the reason it works, 8 divided by 5 is 1 plus 0.6. Oh, that's 5. 1 times 5 plus 0.6 times 5, okay? So that kind of stuff you do have to know. Couple of things, properties of 0. There are a lot of questions that have to do with 0. You have to remember that 0 is neither positive nor negative. However, it is even. It's not odd, it's even. And this is key. You can't divide by 0. 0 can be divided by anything and you get 0. Except you can't even divide 0 by 0. This is a disaster. Dividing by 0 is an epic failure. Your calculator won't do it. All right? Planes fall from the sky. Actually, Ian, there is a great story about a military weapons system that had a divide by 0 error in a trajectory calculating where there was a variable that ended up, sometimes it could be 0, and the thing shut down in the middle of launching an attack because of a divide by 0 error. Yeah, so this is a real problem for getting this, especially if there's a variable x on the bottom. But we'll talk more about that later. Okay, a couple of other words you need to know. Distinct means different from each other, so if a problem says x and y are distinct integers, that means they're different. If it doesn't say distinct, x and y can be the same number. All right, that comes up a lot on QC. So this is important, although usually it's not there. You don't get any distinct. And then, you know, they could be the same number, or you should think that to yourself. Inclusive means including the endpoints, all right, and it will say x is an integer between 3 and 5 inclusive. You'll see something like that. The opposite of that, does anybody know the word that means that the endpoints aren't included? What's the word? I know, it's crazy, but that vocabulary is really important on math on the GRE. What's the word if the endpoints aren't included? Exclusive, exactly, thank you. Okay. I know for some of you this is dull, but so many of the questions depend on absolutely knowing the definition. Everybody knows absolute value? Okay. Smile at me if you're familiar with absolute value. And if you are, just answer this. What's -7 minus 3? What's the absolute value? What's the absolute value of this? Good. Good, yeah, because it's -10, you take the absolute value, -10 gets 10. How about this problem? What's the units digit of monster number times monster number? 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7. Units digit means the ones digit. Anybody know? Ooh, Catherine, yeah, it has to be 1. Caitlin, excellent. All right, it does have to be 1. Catherine, why does it have to be 1? Hop on the mic. You don't have a mic. All right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, but type it. Type it. This is a really neat trick that does come up on the GRE. 7 times 3 is 21. Exactly. Whenever you're multiplying, all right, when you do the units digits, there's no carry into the units digits. So if you think about it, when you line up a multiplication, we're going to make it simple here, like 67 times 53. The units digit is just going to be whatever the units digit of that 3 times 7 is. Okay, so in this case it's 1. And you know, the rest of the multiplication I have carries, but not in the units digit, not in the ones place. Okay, this is a clever trick to remember. The GRE will sometimes ask you something like the units digit of, you know, what about something like this, 25 here to the 37th, okay, times 11, all right, to the 53rd. What's the units digit of that? Ha ha ha. How would you calculate the units digit of that? Same little trick. All right, exactly. Because 25, 5 multiplied by itself, it always is going to end in a 5. 5 times 5 is 5. Even if you do it 35 times, it still ends in a 5. Same thing, 1 times 1 is 1. All right, so the units digit of 25 to the 37th is 5. The units digit of 11 to the 53rd is 1. Multiply them together and you get 5. Pretty cool, huh? Smile if you think that trick was cool. Thumbs down if you don't get how it worked. All right, this is the kind of thing that GRE Math will test, okay? Mostly it's a quick, clever something, all right? So we're going to work on how to be quick and clever as we go through this review. Primes are another big thing to the GRE. How many of you know your primes? First 10 primes. Type them out. Start typing. Start typing. What are your primes? You need to know your primes. And if you're not typing, all right, if you're not typing, if you don't know your primes, I want you to Google Aristophanes' sieve of primes and learn your primes. Okay, good, because you can't type into your calculator, what's a prime? Okay, you need to know them. Good. Jignasha, Caitlin, Catherine, excellent. Excellent, getting comfortable. 1 is not a prime, all right? 1 is not a prime. Okay, so this is something that's really important to point out. I see a couple of people thinking that 1 is a prime. Let's write this out. 1 is not prime. By definition, the first prime is 2. Okay. All right, so we need to refresh on that because sometimes it'll say something, you'll get something, you know, a number is a prime, and it can't be 1 if it's a prime. Okay. So this is important to know. Great. All right. And again, if you're not really comfortable with this stuff, if you haven't looked at primes in a while, Google Aristophanes, and perhaps Ian can help me spell it. Okay, it's a Greek name from ancient history. Aristophanes' sieve of primes. Thank you. Thank you, Ian. Sieve of primes. Okay. Now, a couple of things also, a few more things. Common mathematical phrases. You need to be able to translate what they mean. They're using the mathematical language. 40% of x just means times 0.40x. The product of m and n. All right, and now this is especially important if you learn math in a language other than American English. Smile at me if you learned math in a language other than American English. Anybody? Anybody learn math? Okay, now, Jignasha, since you learn math in a language other than American English, you need to learn the American English terms because sometimes they'll give the math to you in words. All right, and it's different in every language. It's even different from British English to American English and Indian English. All different. Okay, so product of m and n, that just means multiply. Quotient of f and g, that just means f divided by g. Sum means added. All right, ratio of c to d. Okay, that just means c over d. Okay, no, it's the other spelling of Aristophanes. I think it starts with an E. Sieve of primes. It's on Google. Okay. All right, thanks, Ian. I can never spell it, and I try to pawn it off on someone else. Okay, so the average of H and K. Everybody know the average formula? Thank you. Okay, the average formula comes up a lot as well. Okay, so if you struggled with primes, really cool to go and look this up on Google, Aristophanes' sieve of primes, because you need to know your primes for the GRE. All right, so fraction basics, I know this is a huge review, but you've got to remember the numerator is the one on top, the denominator is the one on the bottom. They use the terms, okay? And I'm sure that you all know the basic rules of fraction, a basic rule of fractions. All right, and the big thing is that you need to find common denominators. All right, you have to be able to convert fractions to other forms. You have to both be able to simplify, like turning 8/20 into 2/5, and you have to be able to find a common denominator, which often requires that you multiply a fraction. In this case, we multiplied by 4 over 4. Why is it acceptable to do this? Type it in. Tell me, why is it acceptable? I know this is boring. We're going to get to some problems soon. Why can I do this? What's the rule that lets me do this? Anybody remember? Dig back in those math brains. You all knew in middle school. All right, a lot of the GRE. Yeah, you're doing, no, it's not actually the same thing to both sides. Okay, this one is because you can cancel out the 4. You're multiplying by 1. Right? You're doing the same thing to top and bottom. It's the same as this is just multiplying by 1. All right? It's always acceptable to multiply by 1. Okay, so it's good to know why you can do this stuff. They play games with your head on the GRE. The math is pretty easy, but you have to know why stuff works. Okay? Or they will trap you. They're very sneaky people. All right? Whenever you see fractions and you have to add them, you've got to get a common denominator, okay? So the easiest way to do that, all right, is to just multiply the 2 denominators on the bottom. Now, since you know you're going to get a common denominator here, there's also a technique, cross multiplication, where you just multiply the 3 times the 2, the 5 times the 2, that gives you your 6 here, and your 10. Okay, and you just put it all over what you know the common denominator will be, and you can sort of save a step here. How many of you remember doing that in grade school? Smile at me if you remember that, this trick, the cross multiplication trick. Okay, if you don't remember the cross multiplication trick, you want to refresh yourself on it because you will be doing a lot of computation on the GRE, and you will save yourself a lot of time with this trick. None of this is hard, it's just that it's easy to make a silly mistake. Okay, so another thing I want to point out is this whole thing with canceling as you go. All right, you definitely want to be canceling as you go. Don't wait until the end, even if you have a calculator, because people tend to write the wrong thing. Okay, you want to simplify as you go along. Okay, so you're canceling factors. All right, anybody remember factors from school? Smile at me if you remember factors. Smile if you remember factors. Okay, factors are so useful. All right, now, quick test. I'll put up the timer. Let's do this one in 45 seconds. Try it out. Give me the answer, please. Awesome, and this is one where you can see punching the buttons into the calculator would take longer than canceling. Canceling is fast. All right, as I go through, I realize quickly once I've gotten rid of those that I can cancel those down to 1. Okay, and you want to get in the habit of canceling. All right. Other thing you want to remember, everybody remember the rule, if you're dividing by a fraction, you flip the 1 on the bottom and multiply. Okay, remember that rule? All right, try this problem. You know, again, let's do it fast math, 45 seconds. All right, yes, it is 18 over 25. Now, if you didn't finish that in time, you need to do some drill, okay? This wouldn't work so well on your calculator. Rounding errors will get you into trouble, and you'll have to pick the answer as a fraction often, and it would take you a lot longer, all right? So first thing, you pick off the bottom here, all right? So that's 3 plus 2, whole thing over 6, that's 5/6. You flip it, you multiply, you get your 18 over 25. If this was hard for you, all right, if you weren't fast, and Jignasha was fast, all right, this should be something you can do in 30 seconds. get a real problem like this, it would take too long with the calculator. If you weren't fast on drill, it's not that it's hard. I know, why do they put 6th grade math and 7th grade math on the GRE? They do, but they expect you to be able to do it quickly with these tricks, these canceling tricks. All right, so now I've got a couple more problems, and let's see. Why don't we do, in the interest of time, let's just do this one, okay? Again, 45 seconds, chug through. Awesome, you guys rock. I'm ending the timer early because you all did it in under 45 seconds. Okay, awesome. You guys rock, and you all got it right. And this whole thing with canceling, okay, so I think we can graduate from fractions and move along. Smile at me if, oh yes, you are so ready to graduate from fractions. Okay, all right, I'm just going to show you, my little answers. And we'll move along because I have other stuff. I know this stuff is not very hard intellectually, but it can just wreak havoc with your score not to be able to do this quickly and efficiently, or to be forced to rely on your calculator. This will get you in trouble. You want to be able to do all these manipulations super comfortably. And the whole key is going to be canceling those factors, okay? Now, thinking about the purpose of fractions, decimals, and percents, what are they there for? They also come up a lot in word problems, okay? And the GRE uses them to indicate a proportion whenever we're talking about part over whole, all right? And this is a fundamental formula for FDP questions. FDP is just fractions, decimals, and percents. The part equals a fraction or a decimal times the whole. Okay, what's this related to? What else is part over whole? There's a related concept in math that people think is advanced. All right, but it comes up all the time, part over whole. Anybody know? What else does this bring to mind? Dig back. This would have been a little later. This would have been high school mostly. And it's essentially part over whole. Exactly, Catherine, probability. Probability problems are really, in many cases, a kind of fraction problem. And you have to think, okay, what are the total number of outcomes? What's the acceptable number? What's the part that I'm interested in? So if I said if I have a 6-sided die, each side has the numbers from 1 to 6, and say it's a fair die, totally fair, not cheating, what's the probability if I flip it that I'll land on an even number? Anybody? Type it in. What's the probability of getting an even number? Okay, how would you calculate that? Oh, Jane is smiling and I get, all right, this is something you should be able to do quickly. A probability is a kind of fraction. What's the probability of an even number? I don't see any answers yet. I have a 6-sided die. It has the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. One on each side. It's fair. Okay, yeah, good. Now I see answers. The probability is 1/2, and that's because there are 3 even numbers, okay, out of 6 total. So that's 3 out of 6. That's equal to 1/2. If you struggled with that, you can send me an email, and I'll try and help you catch up. But also, you're going to have to brush up, okay? When we talk about fractions, we are also thinking about stuff we're going to be using for probability questions, which if you're doing well, you'll see on the GRE. All right, and of course, you're all going to be doing well. Okay, so now, how do you calculate? All right, how do you calculate? After taxes, Sally keeps 4/5 of her gross pay. If her monthly taxes are $1,400, what is her monthly gross pay? This doesn't seem to work, does it? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? If she keeps 4/5 of her gross pay, and we'll call this G, her gross pay, how would I set this up? Yeah, okay. All right, exactly. Jane got it. Okay. Now, you have to be careful if you read a question like this. I promise you that many people will put this in. At least 30% of people will put this in, and maybe more, depending on how cleverly they've phrased it. But you've got to ask yourself what's going on, okay? This is where reading the questions is absolutely critical. Often it's not the fraction math that's so hard for us. It's the translating of the question and the knowing what it says, okay? Nice job, Jane. All right. So now fractions are also connected to this whole thing of divisibility. When we cancel fractions, we can always cancel primes, okay? And the reason we can do that, and if there are no shared primes we can't cancel, is that primes are the basic building blocks of bigger integers. There are problems. There's a whole category of problems on the GRE called divisibility problems. And in order to solve these, you have to recognize your primes. You have to be able to break numbers down into primes. So primes are really useful for canceling fractions, for dealing with divisibility problems, and as we'll see later, for exponent problems. I've had them come up in the probability due to the fraction-related issues as well. Okay, so this is the language of divisibility. You get the word divisible. Sometimes you'll see factors. Sometimes you'll see multiple. Sometimes you'll see something, k over 7 is an integer, all right? They don't typically use the terms that we saw in school for divisibility. The terms for divisibility in school are greatest common factor and least common multiple. How many of you remember those terms? The GCF and the LCM. All right, how many of you had to do GCF and LCM problems? Okay. All right, they typically don't use that language, but that's what's going on here often. Okay. So this is, I apologize for the wooden prime tiles. You have to be able to break numbers down into their component primes. How would you break down 50? Anybody remember there's a tool that you learn in grade school? What's the tool for breaking down primes? What is it? Yeah, it's that tree, okay? Factor tree. And on my paper, when I take the GRE, there are always factor trees. And I'm working on my math on the left side, and then I've got factor trees on the right side because there's so many problems that require me to use factor trees. Okay, so factor tree yourselves a 50. What are 50's primes? Beautiful, beautiful. How about 105's primes? All right, keep going. Try factoring. You want to be fast at this. Fast, fast, fast. You should be able to factor each of these numbers in 10 seconds or less. All right. Emma, you're thinking 5. Is that part of it? The first prime? What are you thinking? Okay. Ooh, very nice. Thank you. Jane gave us 105. All right, so these are the prime factors. You want to be able to do this. You need to be able to remember those prime factor trees. And of course, we don't have a lot of time in class to go over this. This is all stuff I'm going to be assuming that you know how to do. So if you're slow, if you weren't able to chug through these and do each of these prime factor problems in under 10 seconds, you need to practice some prime factoring. And then there was a great technique that I used in grade school. I would circle the primes when I found them, because otherwise with a really big one, it's very easy to lose the primes. All right? Very, very easy. Okay? And sometimes you'll have to prime factor a pretty big number. Okay? And there it's really helpful to know your divisibility rules. What's the divisibility rule for 2? This one's easy. How do I know if the number is divisible by 2? It's even. Yeah, it ends in a 0, a 2, a 4, a 6, or an 8. How do I know about divisibility by 3? Anybody remember divisibility by 3? You just have to know the ones for primes, the easy ones. What's divisibility by 3? Units add up. Okay, digits. I think, Emma, you're saying the digits add up to a multiple of 3. Absolutely. No, and you can add them again, right? So, yeah, no, you got it. I know what you meant. I just wanted to clarify for the class. How about 5? What's the divisibility rule for 5? All right, ends in 0 or 5. Exactly. So when you prime factor, people often say, where should I start? I don't know where to start. If you don't see an obvious place to start with, look at 2, 3, and 5. Test to see if those divide, and those are pretty fast to test. All right? You need to be able to do this quickly. If you circle the primes, there are many different ways to break down the prime tree. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Some people might have seen this as 15 times 7. I sure wouldn't have. All right, I broke it down this way. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Many ways to the right answer. All right, so another thing that you need to know, people often get confused, again, the terms multiples and factors and prime factors. What are multiples of 12? Let's list some multiples of 12. Start listing multiples, guys. List multiples, please. Yeah, 24, 24, 36, okay. Yes, excellent. All right, 28 is not a multiple of 4. Oh, sorry, no, 48. Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, factors of 12, though. What are factors of 12? Factor. Very good. Very good. Also, 1 is a factor of 12, and 12 is a factor of 12. All right, great, awesome. You guys know multiples and factors. So maybe you may remember from grade school there are more multiples and fewer factors. There are all these little rhymes associated with math. How about prime factors? Okay, if I were to prime factor 12, what are 12's primes? Okay, you guys are giving me the distinct prime factors. The distinct prime factors of 12 are 2 and 3. Okay, but what's the total set? Caitlin's got it. The total set of prime factors, 2, 2, 3. Okay, here, and I'll just put more stuff up here. 3, 4, 6, and 12. Okay. Notice that factors come in pairs, multiples. We had 12, we had 24, 36, 48, ... All right, awesome. Okay, so you never want to confuse the terms, and it's easy to do so. I still sometimes tell myself more multiples, fewer factors. All right, so that's going to bring me to our next prime-related topic, exponents. Okay, all exponents are a notation. If I say 5 to the 4th, I just mean 5 times itself 4 times. And if ever I get confused about a rule of exponents, I write it out with 2's. You know, if I've got something really weird, I've got x to the k, you know, this looks horrible, right? X to the k, whole thing raised to the z. And I think, how in the heck am I going to do this? Anybody know what x to the k raised to the z is? Looks very confusing. All right. Anybody know? Type it in if you know. Ooh, yeah, you guys are good. Jignasha and, oh, great. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, awesome. Now, if I forget, I just do it out with 2's. I just turn it into, oh, let me calculate. What's 2 to the 2 raised to the 3? But you guys know your exponent rules, so you may not have to do that. But this is just a handy trick if ever you forget. All right. They love variables with exponents because this drives people crazy. All right. They also love negative exponents. Okay. So I think I have a slide on combining exponents, and then I'll show you some fun with negative exponents. All right. And this is called the base. The 5 is the base. The 3 is the exponent. All right. So if you think about how to combine, this is easy. You just add the exponents. All right. But say if you want to combine this, 5 to the a times 10 to the a, what do you do? How do you combine this? 50 to the a. Thank you, Catherine. All right. You multiply the bases. Yeah, because they have the same exponent. And if you write it out, it's 5 times 5 times 5 times 10 times 10 times 10, and you're just regrouping. You can also combine this. Okay. Typically, if you're going to combine this, you need to break down into prime bases. Very nice. I like what Jignasha did. Everybody look at that. I'm gonna clap for that. That was really awesome. That's for this one. Okay, because she factored out a 5. Very nice. All right, well done. What about this? What could you do here? How would you break this down to combine? All right, if this is at all of a struggle, if you can't instantly type it back to me, you need some drill with exponents because they will test this stuff. How would you break this down? Think about it. I don't see anyone typing. This becomes 5 to the 5, all right, times 2 to the 5. Yeah, okay. All right, times 5 to the 10, all right, times 2 to the 10. Everybody see what I did? If this is black magic, 2 to the 10. Okay, 4 is 2 to the 2. Yeah, exactly. All right. And so this will all come down. This will become 5 to the 15th. All right, times 2 to the 25th. Smile at me if that made sense, if you saw what I did and you could repeat it. Smile if that made sense and you saw what I did and you could repeat it. Okay, good. Now, if it's a struggle, you need drill. This is something you were perfectly capable of doing in 8th grade, and you're going to need to be able to do it on the GRE to break this expression down into its component primes and then recombine, okay, with common bases. All right, good. This is just a reminder, by the way. I know I'm not teaching you guys these. Okay, so let's just go through some of this quickly if this is straightforward. All right, these are our rules of exponents. You have to know them on the GRE. You have to be able to combine. Okay, they love exponent problems. They live for this. Too many, actually, I think. All right, and everybody knows how to cancel this. All you're doing is subtracting when you've got division. All right, smile if this is just review. Let me know if it's hard, because I would love to skip ahead. But if it's hard, I don't want anybody struggling. Okay. All right, so all this stuff is straightforward when you divide. Okay, whoops. Okay, so all of this is easy. This is easy, we just did this. What about if I have a negative exponent? All right, let's make this more fun. What does a to the negative 8 mean? What does that mean? Okay, what about negative exponents? A raised to the 18th. No, but I think you know, yeah, 1 over a to the 8th. Okay. Yeah, Caitlin and Emma. Jane, I think you made a typo. Yeah, okay. All right. What about fractional exponents? Haha, let's make it fun. What is a to the 1/2 equal to? Anybody know? Square root. Okay, and you treat it square roots. Roots are just another kind of exponent. They're just fractional exponents. They follow all the rules of exponents. And many modern mathematicians translate that horrendous root sign. Okay. Ooh, yes. Okay, guys, let's try that. Let's take 8 to the 2/3. Nice idea for a problem, Ian. What's 8 to the 2/3? What number is that? Calculate 8 to the 2/3. Yeah, cubed root, so 2, but you want it to the 2/3. Cube root. Well, what do we do first? 8 to the 2/3. Okay, so what that is, you just rewrite it. All right. No, let's rewrite it. Okay, so now we've got 8 to the 1/3. Right, watch me rewrite. Raised to the 2. Okay. Now you can take the cube root of 8, right? That becomes your 2. Okay. And it's still being raised to the 2. It comes out to 4. Okay. All right. Smile if that made sense. Frowns or something if it didn't. This may be a refresher. Thumbs down if it didn't make sense what I just did. Okay, you may need a little refresher if you struggled with this. 8 to the 2/3 just is, oh, it's 8 to the 1/3, cube root of 8, and you square it. There are a bunch of drill sets on this in your number properties book in the exponents chapter. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff you should be able to do with ease. All right. Now, common exponential sequences. The most important here are the powers of 2. How many of you know the powers of 2? If I said, what's 2 to the 10th, can anyone type it back to me? What's 2 to the 10th? Other than Ian. Don't type Ian. I know you know. All right. Good job, Gymnasia. Now, the powers of 2 come up a lot on the GRE. It's easy to calculate them because you just double. All right, but it would be good to become familiar with them. Also, the powers of 10, and to some extent 3s, 4s, and 5s. Especially, now what they love on the GRE, and I seem to get this question all the time. All right. They love it that these 2 are equal. Count them off on your fingers. I count them on my fingers. I count them on my fingers all the time. Okay. One question that I think I see almost every time I take the GRE is what number, what perfect cube is equal to what perfect square, below 100 or something, and it's 64. Okay, because 64 is 8 squared. All right, but it's also 4 cubed. All right, they love this number. It's just a weird thing. Okay, if you want to be comfortable with computing basic exponential sequences, this is really all you need to know. Although I think knowing your 2's up to the power 2 to the 10th is quite valuable. I've had to do a bunch of powers of 2 on the GRE. All right. Other things, we could do a little bit of, this isn't that hard. We'll skip this. How about this? Let's do this as a problem. All right. You guys should be really fast. So I know it would normally take 2 minutes, but this is just computation. How about a minute and a half? Try this. Rock. Ian, clap for them too. Everybody got the right answer. Of course it's A. You all finished early. Okay, awesome. I'm so excited. We don't have any problems with exponent mechanics here. Fantastic. All right. Okay, and so this is what you do, and you have to do this a lot on the GRE, this sort of thing. Realizing that 1,000, oh, that's actually 10 to the third. Okay, so I can just plug in and substitute. Very, very nice. Very nice. You know what? I think we've done so well with exponents, I'm going to move on to geometry. How many of you like geometry? Smile at me if you were once a geometry fan. All right, 2 people saying not such a fan. Okay, now the GRE loves geometry, so convince yourself that you kind of like it. And the way they do it, it's not that hard. They don't do any trigonometry. They do the fun stuff from geometry. You have to remember a few basic formulas, right? Area, also perimeter. Everybody know what the perimeter is? What's the perimeter of this rectangle? Type it in. Type in the perimeter. Let me know that you know what the formula is for perimeter. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Emma, Catherine, and Jane. I appreciate, yeah, some of the lengths of all sides. Okay. Other thing you have to know, mostly you'll get rectangles of some sort and triangles. Area of a triangle is always the base times the height over 2. The height is a line that you draw if you lay the triangle on its longest side. Anybody remember what that's called? What's the geometry term for the longest side? What's the term? You've got to know it because sometimes they refer to it. Hypotenuse. Yeah, isn't that great? It's the hypotenuse. Any side could be the base. I know, Catherine, it's so obnoxious, but you have to know their term. You have to know the terms. It is a base. It is a base, but any side could be the base. Could be a base. Okay. You lay the triangle. You can actually lay it on any of its bases, and then you have to draw a perpendicular line up to the opposite angle. That's how you get the height. So what type of triangle is this super easy to do with, guys? Think back. One type of triangle is totally trivial. Yeah, a right triangle. So they give you tons and tons of right triangles on the GRE, so we're going to be very familiar with right triangles. Other thing, you have to know the basic circle rules. If you know the radius of a circle, you know it all. You can calculate its area, pi times the radius squared, and you can calculate its circumference. Okay, circumference is the perimeter of a circle. All right, that's another fun vocabulary word if you learned math in a language other than American English, the circumference. And the way I keep them straight in my head as to which is which, okay, is that area is squared, because we talk about area in terms of square feet or square meters. And circumference is not, it's just a line. Now, quick question, is the area always greater than the circumference? Answer, is the area greater than the circumference of a circle? Quick question. All right, now, here is where you have to be super, super careful. What if the radius is 1? All right, now this is a GRE evil thing to do because usually the area is greater than the circumference. Isn't that cute, Emma? They are going to try and trick you. Okay. But, okay, so they'll try and trick you with something like that. They'll show you an arbitrary circle and say the area of the circle, the circumference of the circle, and they'll try and trap you because, of course, if the radius is 1, oh, the circumference is actually bigger, a bigger number, okay? So you have to be on the lookout with that. A lot of the geometry looks so straightforward, but it's just that they ask you tricky questions about it, all right? Right triangles, okay? Also, the Pythagorean theorem. The GRE has an obsession with the Pythagorean theorem. They love the Pythagorean theorem. How many of you remember this thing? How many of you had it pounded into you? I had this wonderful geometry teacher when I took geometry for the first time in 8th grade, and oh, I'll never forget it. We had to chant the darn thing. Okay, good, and that'll really help you on the GRE. Okay. Now, one thing to remember, the GRE hates messy answers. Even with calculators, they're going to typically pick side lengths for right triangles, again, because right triangles are so easy. It's easy to calculate their area. It's so easy to get the height. They're going to pick side lengths where everything works out. Okay, so there's some special right triangles that you may remember. Anybody remember the special right triangles? There's some special side lengths, some special ratios. Anybody? Smile at me if you remember them. 30, 60, 90 is special. Yeah, okay, type them in. What are some other ones? Those are the special angles. There are a couple where the angles are special. Okay, isosceles. Isosceles is special. That's another definition. That means that two sides are the same length. Okay, two sides of the triangle are the same length, but it doesn't tell you what length they are, just two sides of the same length. Close enough. Ignacia, that's close enough. What's it called when all the sides are the same length? They use these terms. Just a little refresher. Exactly, equilateral. I love the inserted colon. Okay, equilateral. I don't care how you spell it. You just have to recognize it. Isosceles, two sides the same. Equilateral, three sides the same. All right. Now, your special triangles that come up over and over again, 3, 4, 5. Does anybody remember these guys? And this is because 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, okay, and then 5 squared is 25, okay? So again, knowing your perfect squares will help you with this. This is another 3, 4, 5. Here's a weird one, all right, 5, 12, 13. That's because 25 plus 144 equals 169, okay? So a lot of these will come up over and over again on the GRE because they like nice integer answers, all right? I do want to go back to 30, 60, 90 though, Catherine and Jane's triangles, 9, 90, 45, 45, because those come up a lot as well. But you need to know these two, recognize them, and multiples of them. More often I see 6, 8, 10 than 3, 4, 5, honestly, on the GRE. They think that, you know, extra layer. Okay. Whoops. They think this extra layer just makes it more fun. Okay. Smile if you remember these triangles from geometry class, if you remember the 3, 4, 5s. 3, 4, 5, everybody should remember. This one you may not have gotten to, the 5, 12, 13. This may be fuzzier. Okay. And I do want to talk, okay, we're not going to do this problem because we're a little crunched on time, but I do want to talk about, I want to put the other one up, the 30, 60, 90. What are the side ratios? The 30, 60, 90 is about like this. Okay, and here they give you that this is 90. Anybody remember what are the side ratios? This angle is 60 and this is 30. Anybody remember this, or are we resisting? A lot of people remember that it's special, but it's kind of a pain to remember exactly what it was. Yeah, but what are the side ratios? Okay, for example, if I tell you that this side has length 1, okay, you should be able to figure out the other sides. All right, 1 is a square root. You got it, Catherine. I'm just going to put it up here for you just to refresh this. This was something that you had down cold when you took geometry because you did them over and over again. Oh, Jane. Jane rocks. She remembered the root 3. Clap for Jane. Awesome. Awesome. All right, how long out of school are you, Jane? Are you still in college? That's impressive to remember that. Awesome. All right. Okay. Now, let's look at this one. You just saw it in the OG. Aha, you reviewed. Okay, all right. She lets us in on her secret. Yes, do the reading. It's awesome. It will make a huge difference. Okay, so what about with this guy? If this side is 1 and this side is 1, and it's an isosceles triangle, what about the length of this side up here? What is it? Root 2. Okay, now, quickie, sometimes you have to approximate root 2 and root 3 on the GRE. Anybody remember what root 2 is or what root 3 is? What are they approximately? Yeah, beautiful. Okay. Root 2 is about 1.4, and the way I remember that is that February 14th is Valentine's Day. Okay. And root 3, anybody remember root 3? 1.7. Okay, now this, I went to grad school in Chicago, at U Chicago, and they're big on St. Patrick's Day, which is 3/17, and that's how I remember root 3 is about 1.7. Okay, and these are quite useful. All right. Oh, your birthday. Wonderful. Ah, Ian is such a nerd, but we think he's awesome anyway. That's how he remembers Valentine's Day. Oh, and I know Ian's girlfriend, and she's a lovely person. I'm glad you remember Valentine's Day, Ian. Okay, guys, this is awesome. All right, we're going to run just a couple minutes over because I want to refresh you on a few more things. I've got just a couple things from algebra. Okay, you guys want to do a geo problem? We're going to run over no matter what, 5 minutes. The question is, are we going to run over 5 minutes or 10? You guys want to try a geo problem, an actual one from the GRE? Smile if you want to try a geo problem. All right, a couple of you are up for it. We'll do it quickly, okay? Attack with enthusiasm, all right? This is typical. They're going to ask you some sort of reasoning question. You guys are good, so let's do it quickly. Right, you guys rock. Everybody did it in under a minute. Awesome. Okay, which special triangle is this? Oh, look, a 10 and an 8. What does this have to be? AB has to be a 6. It's not a, 3, 4, 5. Catherine, your brain is working faster than your typing fingers. That's okay, okay? We're after that brain speed. So the radius is 3, and then you just use the formula. All right. If they give you a triangle, they give you the triangle for a reason. Awesome. Now this is going to be what we're going to be doing as we do GRE math. It's all about thinking, why did they give me that information? How can I use that information? These are puzzle problems. How many of you do some kind of puzzles? Anybody here play Ken or Sudoku or even a crossword puzzle? Smile at me if you like any kind of puzzle. You are going to love the GRE. The GRE is all about little puzzles. I think the best thing that I do to practice for the GRE is that I play Ken with my 12-year-old, Ken and Sudoku. She loves them both. All right? And crossword puzzles to work on vocabulary. Okay? So it's all about noticing something when you're solving a puzzle. All right? Ken is another silly game. You can Google it, and I'll send you to my favorite site, okay, after class. I'll send you to some, if you guys like those kind of games, they're great practice for the GRE Quant, and I'll send you my list of favorite games. Okay, it's a way to study without actually studying, which makes it better. Okay, so last thing, I'm sure you guys all remember algebra and solving for variables. You have to isolate the variable. Okay, everybody remember PEMDAS? I learned it, you know, if you're slightly older as I am, you learned it as please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay, or PEMDAS. That's the newer thing. And you just take, when you're taking a math expression apart, when you're simplifying, you want to isolate x. The key to remember here, undo the low precedence operations first. Okay, so adding the 8, and this goes very step by step. It may be too easy, okay? Smile at me if you remember Algebra 1 reasonably well. Okay, thumbs down if you don't remember it so well. Okay, everybody remembers it pretty well, which is good. And if you don't, it's no big deal. Everybody here passed at least Algebra 2. So just some drill will bring it all back, this whole thing with isolating variables. Okay. And even something, you know, the GRE tries to scare you. Oh, it's a cube, I should panic. Okay. Well, actually, no. Negative 2t cubed is negative 54. All right, you simplify along. T to the third equals 27, t equals 3. Now, but what if, though, what if it were something like, oh, here's another one. This is sort of typical evil of the GRE. T to the fourth equals 81. What would t be here? Here you have to be careful. It's puzzle-like. Emma's saying 3. Jane is saying 3. Jignasha says 3. And yet, you guys are missing something. It's the GRE. It's trying to trick you. What have you forgotten about? What, if you raise a number to the 4th power, if you raise it to an even power, what happens? Anybody? There's a trick. Negative 3. Okay, yeah. Awesome. Jignasha and Emma saw it. Okay, you have to be careful. Exponents raised to even powers. That's why quadratics are so tricky, right? 2 solutions. Okay. Be very, very careful of even exponents on the GRE. They're trying to make you forget about the negative possibility. Okay, so, you know, basic rules. I know this stuff is very basic. What happens to people in the GRE is not that you can't do basic algebra, it's that they trick you into forgetting something like this that you know, okay? So this is where drill can be helpful. If you were tricked, doing a few drill sets can just really pound it into your brain again. Your high school algebra teacher tried to trick you with this as well, and that's how you learned it. But a few drill sets will bring back your craftiness, so you won't fall for it. Okay. Other thing, you know, this is pretty straightforward. Let me see if I can find some better problems to solve. Okay. Everybody remember systems of equations, linear equations, things that look like this. If 7x plus 4y equals 43 and y plus 8 equals 2x. Okay. This comes up on the GRE. We'll do a couple problems like this. The key is to remember, what are the techniques? Type them into me. What's the basic technique for solving this? What's the basic technique for solving this kind of thing? Simultaneous equations. Okay, but then that's what they are. Substitution and subtraction and elimination. Yeah, or substitution and elimination. Two basic techniques. They're mathematically the same. And again, you want to be fast. You want to have practiced them. Okay. Why don't we try, I have a cute little problem for you. Why don't we try a cute little math problem, just in words. I'm going to tell you in advance. I know this is so easy. This fun problem I'm going to put up next is a problem very much like this, except it's a word problem, so you've got to translate it and get the math. But you guys are good. So why don't we try this? Let me put it up on my little timer. Again, you guys are good and you guys are fast. So we'll do it in less time than typical. All right, awesome. Everybody's solving this. I'm going to put up my solution. Okay, yes, the length of the shorter piece is 11. This was how I did it. Whoops, if you made a math error, okay, take a look at this solution. All right. I usually like to use letters that are easy, that I won't confuse. I'd confuse X and Y, so I might use S for short, B for long, or G for long, but here I've got S for short, B for big. Okay, S plus B is 40, that's this. B equals S plus 18. Jignasha, do you know what happened as you look at the work here? What happened? It's really, really good if you make an oopsie on one of these to go back and think what happened in your mechanics. Did you get the right first two equations? Were you okay through here? Yeah? Okay, so what happened here? Silly mistake? Okay, now, unfortunately, the majority of the mistakes, okay, 40 minus 18, all right. Now, that should tell you something. When you are working on the GRE, yeah, okay. The majority of the mistakes that people who are comfortable with basic algebra and geometry make are silly mistakes. So you don't want to dismiss a silly mistake. You want to go back and look and think, notice, you know, is there something with your work? Is there something messy on your paper that could have caused it? Notice how much of an effort I made to be neat. All right, and I'm naturally not neat. I was a math major. I'm a disaster on paper without some some serious effort, and that will cost you dearly on the GRE. You'll miss all these problems that you know you could have solved. Okay, so if you made a mistake, just go back through and think, what did I do? How could I have better organized my work? Okay, and often people who are very good at math are the worst culprits, and Jignasha is very good at math, all right, and has been our fastest answerer for a number of questions. So, you know, it can happen to anyone, okay? It can happen to anyone, but I want you to learn from it so that you get the math score you deserve, all right? Everyone, yeah, you're overconfident. It's very common. We think this is so easy, and we're not focused, and we're not disciplined, and we don't keep our work neat. And then it's very easy to make a mistake, all right? Not a big deal, just wanted to point it out, all right? So we're almost done with our review. Everybody remember inequalities? This also comes up on the GRE. They think inequalities are hard. Ooh, they're going to frighten you, right, with an inequality. One big rule to remember, if you divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality, okay? Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, all right? Shake it off, let it go. No worries, let's work on this problem. Now, what's the rule? What if you divide by a variable? Type it to me. What's the rule? What if I divide by a variable? Okay, what if I had a variable and I wanted to divide by the variable? Anybody? What do I do to the inequality if I divide by a variable? If I divide by a negative, I flip the sign. But what if I divide it by x? What happens? What happens if I divide by a variable? Yeah, two values. Dividing by a variable is a no-no. Do not divide by a variable unless you know its sign. Okay. You know it's fine. Because you don't know what to do with the inequality. You don't know whether to flip it or not. Okay, so this is a very important rule to remember, and this is a mathematical error to divide by a variable if you don't know its sign. They're going to try and trick you into doing this. So before you divide by a variable, make sure you know its sign. Now sometimes they'll tell you something that, you know, you're computing that X is the number of oranges, or it's the population in County J. Well, in that case, it has to be a positive number. Sometimes they'll give you a quantity. Sometimes they'll be straightforward and say X is a positive number when you can divide by it, but other times they'll just tell you it's a quantity. So you have to be careful whenever you have an inequality. All right. So just a refresh of rules you knew really well. Okay. Absolute value equations. This is where you get those two possibilities. Emma, is this what you were thinking about? This is where you have to solve on two sides. Okay. And they're related to inequalities. All right, absolute values and inequalities seem to come up together. Yeah, this is all the stuff you haven't done in a long time, but it's good that everybody's remembering so well. Okay, so here you have two possibilities because X could be, you know, this 2X minus 7 could be a positive number, could be 11, or 2X minus 7 could be negative 11. This is the part that people forget about. They try to trick you into forgetting about the negative possibility, all right? Whenever you have an equation with a variable inside the absolute value, you have to solve twice, okay? And sometimes, how many of you remember doing this kind of thing on number lines? And you do this on number lines with inequalities where you have to mark the shaded region. You know, it's something like this. Maybe did this. All right, and that's another way where these types of problems are similar. Sometimes the GRE will even have you do that, all right, but they just have you pick the number line. You don't have to draw it yourself, thank goodness. Okay, so yeah, it's a big review. The GRE's math is based on top of, really, it's junior high and the beginning of high school math. It's not that hard, but they're going to try and trick you and trap you. So this is just a refresher. Hopefully, okay, hopefully this feels refreshing. But this is just a refresher to remind you of that underlying math so that we can really, in class, focus on the tricks so you don't get trapped. All right, and that's what we'll be doing going forward next week. That's what we did last week. We looked at tricks for QC. Okay, one other little thing I have here, a function. Everybody remember this notation? Remember this, f of x? Smile at me if you remember f of x. Okay, if you don't remember f of x, that's okay. But you're going to need to review this notation. It's just function notation. It doesn't come up a lot, but it does come up occasionally. So what's the value of f of negative 4? What do? What's the rule with a function? Anybody remember? What do? What do? Plug in negative 4 for x. Exactly. Okay. If f of m is 17, what is m? You should also be able to solve for it, right? Because then you would say 3m minus 1 is 17. Okay. So this whole plug and chug thing should be something you remember how to do. All right. Now, so I think I'm going to just say we're done. That's enough. That's a lot of math review, okay? Good job, you guys. I'm sorry we ran a little over, but I wanted to make sure we got through all of this. This is the end of review. If you realized you're a little rusty on something, a few drill sets will solve it. Email me or email Ian. Next week, it's full steam ahead, how to deal with the tricks, how to unravel the tricky problems, and I will send out Ken and other math game websites. All right, Ian, here you go, your mic.
I have nothing to add except have a great week, guys, and we'll be sending you lots of handouts between Liz and I, so be on the lookout for them. And in terms of homework, same as always, if you check your your syllabus. It'll all be in there in the syllabus. Last week I actually wrote it all out for you guys, but take a look in the syllabus from now on, and I just don't have the syllabus in front of me. But lots of good stuff to do. I think the next thing that you're looking at is the FDP book. Is that right, Liz? FDPs are our next math topic, so that's the big deal. Yeah, so if nothing else, get through that FDPs strategy guide. And other than that, I'll send you guys out of here just with the comment that, as always, shoot us an email if you have any questions, and happy to stick around here for a little bit if anybody has any further questions. And if not, enjoy your rest of Father's Day and enjoy your week, and we'll see you guys here same time next time.